Oh, and just so you know, like, so this, what this means up here is that these iron labs are so bad that they call the doctor the same day. These are bad. They get better, don't worry, I'm not dying in front of you. But when they do this, they call you and are like, you need to bring this person in. So, okay, red blood cells. So this is your reference range, and I'm sure most of you guys have seen labs, either yourself or somebody else. But what you do, like each lab is slightly different, so you want to put it in context. So I don't have very many red blood cells compared to what should be typical. That means that I just am not making as many. The second thing that you can see, so slight hypochromia, that's where there's just not very much iron into the cells. Nucleated red blood cells, that's what I was talking about earlier. They look for this because they just want to make sure there's not some other pathology going on. So hemoglobin. Your typical hemoglobin should be, in this lab, 11.9 to 15.2. Mine's 8.7. Hemoglobin is literally the amount of hemoglobin in the cell. So it's low, which means that it's not, you can have a hemolytic anemia or you can have an iron deficiency anemia. But either way, my hemoglobin, I don't have enough hemoglobin in my blood. Hematocrit, this is a measure of packed red blood cells as a percentage. So if you consider all your plasma and everything else to be 100%, my hematocrit is 29.2 and it should be 35. It means that in each amount of blood that I have, there's not enough red blood cells and packed hemoglobin matter that can bring oxygen to your cells. So you're in a hypoxic state. And then mean cell volume, that's okay. It just means I have the average number of cells. Mean cell hemoglobin, again, each cell has fewer hemoglobin units than you would like. And the mean cell hemoglobin concentration, that's more like a percentage, right? That there's less than should be concentrated in a blood cell for efficient oxygen delivery. Now here's what we were talking about before. Total iron. So your total iron, the average is 28 to 170. My iron is low. That means I have less iron total in my bloodstream than somebody else, which makes you think, okay, this is probably iron deficiency anemia. And then you confirm it. So by this is your transparent iron binding capacity, right? So it's at the very high end of the range. It's not abnormal, but almost all of it's empty relative to somebody who would have a lot of iron in their blood. And then your percent saturation, that's 3. So that means like 3% of my transferrins have been taken up by iron, whereas in a typical situation, 19 to 34% would be. So the reason I pulled these up specifically is because you can see, so you have an indication of anemia, and then in order to figure out what type it is, you can look at what the iron levels actually are in the blood, and you can get a confirmation. One more time, again, just to reiterate, we don't diagnose this. But if you work in patients that are anemic a lot, you will get really used to seeing these labs, and when you get a diagnosis from the physician and they send the labs over, you'll be familiar with what you're looking at. And it is helpful. Okay, and then so they summarize all the bad ones down below. And, so now let's see what happens after you get iron. Let's see there. Is that a new one? Oops.
Yeah, the white blood count.
There we go. Yeah, everything went back to normal. So this is 6 months after I got an iron infusion, because I got an iron infusion like 2 weeks after those labs. So my total iron is in normal range. My iron binding capacity has gone down. My percent saturation has gone up. All of these are within the normal range, indicating that now I have enough iron in my blood. Additionally, because these labs are 6 months later, the red blood cells, you can see the numbers gone up. I'm always at the low end of the range, so it's fine. But you can see that we've had 6 months, which means that all of the old hypochromic microcytic red blood cells have died, and all of the new ones have come to take their place. And these ones have enough hemoglobin. You know, the mean cell volume is better, the mean cell hemoglobin was in range, the mean cell hemoglobin concentration, all of this is within range. So you can see that treatment either by infusion or ideally with diet and supplementation has reversed the iron deficiency anemia. So it was the right diagnosis and it was the right treatment, and then in my case, I went back to being able to perform all of my life duties better. So I wouldn't give you a lab thing and go, okay, this is exactly what you don't need to interpret all of these. I would say, okay, so here's a clinical picture of a patient. The transferrin iron binding capacity is low. The total iron is low, right? Or the transferrin iron binding capacity is high, the total iron is low, and the percent saturation is low. Is this indicating that they have enough iron, or that they do not have enough iron? Does that make sense? So if you were preparing your cheat sheet, you would want to know what direction these things went. So if you do not have enough iron, your transparent iron binding capacity is high, your total iron is low, and your percent saturation is low. The opposite is true. If you have an overload of iron, if you're in a hemochromatosis state, you have very high saturation, you have high iron, and you have low binding capacity because all of those transparents have been taken up by iron. So, and then you should understand hemoglobin and hematocrit, the rest of it, not too much. But hemoglobin, because we know that hemoglobin holds the heme unit. If you do not have enough hemoglobin and you also don't have enough iron, you're headed towards not enough. And if you have iron and then you're in low iron status, and if you have just a ton of hemoglobin, if your hemoglobin is above normal range and the iron in your blood is high, then you probably have iron overload because you're trying to do everything you can to get rid of that hemoglobin, and some of that is to make more red blood cells. Does that make sense? And that's all in that chart on page 820, figure 3613, in a slightly different way. You don't need to know the specific ranges or numbers. I'm not going to test you on. This is 11.4. Is that low, normal, increase? I will tell you, this is 11.4. That's low compared to what a typical person would be. Tell me about the iron status. Okay? So...